All right, many thanks, Christoph. It's great to be here. It's great to meet you all virtually. A very kind introduction. Thank you very much, Christoph. First of all, this is, though I've done this presentation quite a number of times, this is the first time I've done it over Zoom. So this will be interesting, and you'll see quite a number of references to in-person events that hopefully at some point you'll get to experience again in future. But let's dive right in and talk about what exactly is a pitch. A pitch is, just to understand what we're talking about, is a artificially constrained presentation. So you've probably done quite a lot of presentations in your career to date, but this one is artificially constrained to just 3 minutes. And that means you have a different set of skills that you might need to employ when you're trying to give a pitch presentation. And you might think, well, why do we do this? It's uncomfortable, it's difficult, I have so much I want to say. And this is a valid question. But the reason we do this is it is a very important skill for you to master. If your project is going to be successful, and I hope all of you will have successful projects, you're going to have to explain your idea a great many times. So let's imagine a scenario that could happen any day, and you are walking down the corridor in the office in some future environment where that happens, and you bump into one of the executives from your organization. And they say, oh, well, what are you working on at the moment? And you think, aha, this is my opportunity. This is my chance to explain my great idea. And that's great, but they don't know anything about your idea. They don't know that this idea that you have could be the future of your organization. But this is your chance to tell them. You may only get a couple of minutes. And even if you don't know it, this is your pitch presentation. So this is something you're going to have to do a great many times if your project is going to be successful. It's also a chance in this great event that they're putting together for you, Union are putting together, is a chance for you to get your presentation, to get your project in front of a lot of people at the same time. These people could be investors or partners or supporters. You don't know that yet, but they could be, right? So this is your chance for them to engage with you. And finally, in and of itself, you as a group having to distill your idea into something you can communicate briefly is often, in my experience, the first time that the team members actually get on the same page. So how do we do this in such a short period of time? Well, the key is that you don't need to say everything. You just need to distill down into the key points that you want your audience to remember. There's actually a big distinction between what you think that you need to say and what you actually will need to say. The problem is that because you're so engaged in your project, you often can't see that difference. And your goal in these 3 minutes is quite straightforward, right? First of all, you need people to understand what you do. And this might seem obvious to the point of being trite, but it's actually quite difficult to achieve, especially if your idea is innovative or a little bit based on technology. This can be quite a challenge. So don't underestimate getting people to understand what it is you want to do. Second of all, you want people to be interested enough to, in the past, come up and talk to you afterwards. But in the Zoom world, maybe send you a message on Zoom, maybe send you an email. But you want them to be intrigued enough to continue that conversation. This is just a starting point, remember. You don't need to tell them everything. You just need people to be interested and engaged. So there are 3 main elements to a great presentation. And that is, first of all, you yourself, the presenter. Second of all, it's the script or what it is you're going to say. And finally, it is the slides or the background that you're presenting against. In the order, not by accident, but this is actually in order of importance, in my opinion. So let's first of all go to the presenter. So first of all, you need to be enthusiastic, right? The goal of your presenter is to capture the audience's attention and to bring them along as you tell your story, right? Especially when we're talking about Zoom, it's easy for people to disengage, to start looking at their phones, to think about what they want to do for dinner, to do perhaps a little bit of housework at the same time. So your job as a presenter is to make sure that they are engaged all the way through your presentation. The best presenters are captivating and informative and provocative as they tell the story. The worst presenters can be boring or convoluted or distracting through using many distracting words and slides. So remember, you've got to keep people engaged. And if you're not enthusiastic, your audience are not going to be enthusiastic either. You want to speak slowly and clearly. I often see people who are rushing, and I tend to rush myself. So you need to think to yourself, take a breath before you continue. And I would strongly recommend, if possible, you stand up, right? Your body language does affect the way that you are able to speak. I'm standing up right now, which means even if you can only see above the neck, because you're on Zoom, you're still able to express yourself with your hands, and that comes out in the way that you are speaking. So when you're thinking about presenting, you're going to have some notes. And even though you've got notes, you don't want to be reading from them. And this is especially tempting if you're on Zoom. It's very, very tempting to write everything out that you want to say and then just read it, right? But unfortunately, this will make you sound incredibly robotic. And again, if you're not engaging, people will disengage and start doing other things, start reading their emails. So what you want to do is write your notes out, but you don't want to be reading from them because otherwise you will sound robotic. However tempting that is, you might think, oh, I'll get my second screen set up, I'll put it on my iPad and I'll just read it. But no, everyone will be able to tell and it will not be a very engaging presentation. So don't do that, however tempting it is. So we've talked about you as the presenter. And again, that is the most important element. So think about yourself and practice your presentation. But now we'll talk about your script, or what exactly you're going to say. So I'm going to give you some tips around the content of what you want to say. But first of all, let me just give you some thoughts about the process for how I practice a pitch presentation. First of all, I want to write out exactly what I'm going to say, right? I write out on an A4 piece of paper, and I take a pen and I write it all out, and it usually fits on a couple of pieces of paper. And then I put that to one side and I try and practice without reading the script. And usually I'm going to forget about half of it. And that's okay. So I'm going to come back then to my script again and look at it again and try it again. And I would repeat this process several times because that way you'll start to build up a robust presentation where even if you forget a bit or you can't remember the next word, you can still continue because you've practiced it enough times that you're still going to get the main points, even if you forget a sentence or forget a word. So let's talk about the content of your presentation. What are you going to add in here? Well, first of all, what are you not going to add, right? So you want to avoid ambiguity. Ambiguity is the opposite of clarity. So ambiguity is something that could be interpreted in different ways. It may take questions for people to understand. So you want to, as far as possible, avoid any ambiguity in what it is you're saying. Be as clear as possible. You want to avoid complexity. And that might sound strange. But if you look at the root of the word simple and the root of the word complex, they both have the same root. And that means to do with twisting or braiding. And a complex idea is something that has multiple ideas twisted together. But a simple idea is when you just take one idea. And that is what I recommend you do. Don't mix many ideas together, but think about expressing clearly one idea. And the last point here to avoid is mystery. And you might think, well, a little bit of mystery could be quite good for my presentation, get people intrigued. What I mean by this is avoid marketing speak, avoid buzzwords, avoid jargon, avoid MBA speak, makes you sound clever, but conveys zero information. Avoid words that are very specific to your project, so acronyms, things like this. Avoid leaving people going, I wonder what that is referring to. So when you're thinking about this, what you're actually going to include, try to make it conversational, right? Imagine that imagine you can present this to your mum, and if she can understand everything and says, that's a great job, I'm so proud of you, then you've done a great job. You've got a great pitch then. So you want to avoid jargon that people in the audience may not understand if they don't have that context you have. You want to avoid having a preamble. So you want to go straight into your idea. without long, convoluted run-ups to what you're going to talk about, because people will zone out again and start checking their phones. And finally, and very importantly, you want it to be reproducible. So what do I mean by reproducible? Well, what I need to understand when I hear your ideas, I want to have an image of it in my head. I want to be able to concretely imagine what it is you're talking about. So let's see what that actually looks like in practice. Here is an example that I can't picture in my head, and this is something I've seen all the time. This is a real example, and it's things I see all the time. And this says, you might not be able to see it behind the big X I put on top of it. What it says is, we're going to transform the relationship between the individual and information. That provides me with zero informational value. this sentence, right? This is a very bad description of a project. And I see examples like this all the time, where all these nouns are all abstract. And if I go away and I think, what does this mean? I can't picture anything in my head. I have a blank slate. So let's look at a good example. Well, this is an example from the private sector, but this is a real example of Airbnb, of their very first pitch deck, right? And this is before anybody had ever had this idea of staying in a stranger's house. Airbnb, the first online marketplace, lets travelers book rooms with locals instead of hotels. So from this, we can see it's concise, it's descriptive. I have a sense of what they're doing, and I can immediately imagine, kind of in my head, what we're talking about, and I can start to think of some of the more interesting questions that maybe follow on from this. How do they do this? Do they have the team that can do this? What have they done so far? How do I know that they could make this happen? So this is leading to interesting questions in my head, whereas this is leading to, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm going to have to need more information. Can you clarify that for me, please? So starting off on the right foot, getting everybody on the same page as quickly as possible is the first thing you want to do in your presentation. You want to stand up and say, hi, my name is Jamie, and I've started Airbnb, an online marketplace that lets travelers book rooms with locals instead of hotels. I wish I could say that, but so immediately you're going, okay, I kind of know what we're talking about. We're talking about hotels. We're talking about booking rooms, right? Whereas if I stood up and say, hi, my name is Jamie, we're going to transform the relationship between individuals and information, I go, you're going to do what? So this is a really, really important starting point for your presentation. So what we're going to do now, to make sure everybody is awake, because it might be early in the morning somewhere, is just do a quick breakout where we all, in our teams, think about what is our 1 or 2 line description of what we actually do. So first of all, you as the presenter, we've talked about being enthusiastic. We've talked about being speaking slowly and clearly. We've talked about not doing your presentation from your couch. We've talked about notes and how you want to use them not as a crutch, but as a practice tool. And look at all those happy people in a physical environment. One day we may have that. And then we've talked about the second most important thing, that is the script, of what exactly you're going to say. So we've talked about some things to avoiding ambiguity and complexity and mystery, what I called buzzwords, marketing words, and jargon. And we want something that you could a great pitch being something that you could give to your mother, and she would say, congratulations, I'm so proud of you. That's an amazing project. And then we've talked about how you might want to start. So we're talking about some opening phrases that you may want to avoid. This one being one full of zero information, and this one being one that conveys a lot of information in a short period of time. It's very concrete. So I know we didn't have very long for that breakout session. I'm sorry about that, but do continue to think about that opener as we go into now the structure overall of what you're going to do. So again, this is a recommendation, so don't take this as I have to do all these, but this is this is a way you could think about structuring your presentation. So first of all, the intro. Well, we've talked about that just now. And this is, again, how I would phrase it is a sort of one-liner that immediately brings everybody in your audience onto the same page as you. Everyone, remember, has to hear a lot of presentations back to back. So they may go from hearing something about drones in Tanzania to hearing about some amazing blockchain technology. And you need to make sure that people can make that mental shift and can be on the same page as you as quickly as possible. You don't want them to be thinking 2 minutes in, going, what is this about again? We've just been talking about drones, and now this is something about something, I don't know. So your intro, you get them on the same page as you as quickly as possible. Be super clear. This is what we are, this is who we are, and this is what we do. Then you can take a step back, right? The reason these two next points are in red is because they're the most important. This is where you will spend the bulk of your presentation. What is the problem you're solving? Why are you doing this at all, right? There's plenty of things everybody could be working on. Why this? Why now? Why this problem? And the second thing is, and what are you doing about it? What is your solution? Remember, especially people who are more senior, such as these dragons, they probably get pitched 100 ideas a week, right? Why is your idea the best idea that they're going to hear this week? Why is it the best way of solving this problem that hasn't been done before, or hasn't been done as well as you're going to do it? So again, those are the two kind of core components, or the core foundations of your presentation. How does it work, right? Explain, make sure people understand what exactly it is you're doing and how does it work. Again, it's really easy to skip over this and to leave it at an abstract level, but it's very important. And then the next 2 points, progress and team. Well, depending on how early your idea is, maybe you don't have any progress, okay? And if that's the case, talk about your team, right? If you don't have any progress, you just came up with this idea last week in the bath, say, okay, we are the best team for this, right? We've got 3 PhD people, we've got a guy who used to run our Middle East operations, and together we are going to make this idea a reality, because there are millions of ideas in the world, but there are not millions of ideas that can be turned into a very successful project. So if you don't have any progress, talk about your team, talk about, okay, this is why we are going to be able to do that. But even better than having a great team is having progress, right? If you've got progress and you can go, look, we've already done this. This is what we've done. We've worked with all these users. We've run it in 3 countries. We've built an amazing app that everybody now uses in the whole world, right? Everyone's going to go, wow, I don't care if it's, you know, your 15-year-old brother and you doing this. This is amazing. Look at all this stuff you've done, okay? So these 2 points can be balanced depending on the strength of your team and how much progress you've actually done so far. And then you may want to finish up with an ask or something concrete and a recap. So I would hit again the most important points of my presentation, and there can be only a couple, right? People are going to see maybe whatever it is, 8 presentations. They will only remember a couple of things from your presentation. 6 presentations, thank you, Christoph. They will only remember a couple of things. So however much you wish them to remember every single detail, think about those couple of things you actually want them to remember. And at the end of the day, they're going to be thinking, you know, do they understand the idea? Again, going back to that first goal I told you about. Your goal is for, first of all, them to understand your idea, right? And then hopefully they're excited by it, because again, they should feel your enthusiasm, despite it being through Zoom, thousands of miles away. If they can feel your enthusiasm, they go, oh, okay, this is exciting, this is interesting. And last of all, do they believe you can deliver, right? Do they believe either you've already started delivering, or you've got a team that you've put together that can deliver on this vision that you have? If you can get those 3 points, you will get people interested, and you'll get people on board, your supporters. It's what you need. So we've talked about presenter. We've talked about now what you're going to say. And last of all, we're going to talk about some slides. Now, before we do this, I just want to say, don't spend all your time on slides. It's very important to focus on what you're going to say and getting comfortable with giving that presentation without just reading from your slide, reading from your notes. Okay, very, very important. So I can't emphasize this enough, but despite this, I am still going to give you a few tips on slides. Even though mine tend to be frankly below average, right? They're not very good, but they convey the points they need to convey. And that's the important part about slides. They should be simple, they should be legible, and the point you're trying to make should be obvious. right? This is the key part about thinking about slides. It's incredibly easy to start cluttering them up with lots of information, right? Which is very easy to do with thinking we need to cram lots and lots of text onto my slides. And this may be possible to read when you're on Zoom and you've got it filling your screen, right? But if you're in a room in the future and you put up a slide like this, people are either reading it, in which case they're not paying attention to you, right? Which is what they should be doing, or they can't read it because it's too small. So bad slides. Another example of a bad slide. Again, very illegible. The point is well, the point is not complicated, but the text is complex, the font is complex, and the contrast is very subtle. It's very hard to read. And again, if I'm thinking about in a room, people's heads may cut off this text here as well. So again, you want to be avoiding these type of slides. Diagrams are a very popular way of explaining complicated ideas, but sometimes they can be complicated in and of themselves. So diagrams often can confuse more than explain. Screenshots as well often don't convey a lot of information other than that you can make nice looking screenshots. So if anyone, I put this slide up for several years in a row now, and I still have no idea what this diagram is. If anyone has any idea, then do let me know. I'll be really interested to find out. So a few other, Christoph, I'll send it to you. You can, if you want to read it in future. So a few other tips about slides. Too much text we talked about. Excessive branding on slides, kind of cluttering everything up. Photos with no information. Animations are often very distracting. Transitions, memes, subtle humor, videos, these type of things. What all this does is it distracts from you as the speaker. And at the end of the day, that is what you want people to be paying attention to. What you're saying and the information you're trying to convey, the story you're trying to tell about your idea. Not distracted by your fancy slides. And you're certainly not distracted by my fancy slides because they're not very fancy. So to wrap things up, what exactly would I recommend? You've got to practice, right? It sounds very obvious, and many of my points are quite basic. You know, your goal is for people to understand what it is you do. You don't want to be focusing too much on your slides, and you do want to practice a lot so you can give your presentation smoothly, even if you stumble over a little bit over the words that you say. So I think we're going to have, well, I'll give you a few common mistakes, and then we'll do one final breakout session. So going longer than 3 minutes, right, is very common and may get you cut off depending on the severity of the timing and the technology. So you really want to practice with a timer so that you're really comfortable coming in under those 3 minutes, and you don't get somebody kindly writing to you in the chat telling you to shut up or cutting you off with technology. Okay, really recommend practicing with a timer so you're comfortable with those 3 minutes. Again, this can lead to a kind of a weak ending if you run out of time. It often relates to that first point. If you don't practice enough, you can fill your speech with lots of rambling or umming and ahhing, and often you can lead to missing some of your key points. And this is related, of course, all these points are related to making lots of beautiful slides, but forgetting to practice. And finally, trying to do a live demo, I probably wouldn't recommend it. It often breaks down trying to do it in the moment, and will certainly disrupt your flow. And the last point I will leave with before we do the breakout rooms, jargon and acronyms are a favorite in the UN system. Everyone loves them, but do not assume that everybody knows all the jargon and acronyms you're talking about. Okay, if you're using some special technology, don't use the jargon from that technology. If you work in a specific agency, don't use all the acronyms from your agency and assume that everybody knows those acronyms. This is very important and probably the most common mistake I see in UN pitches. This is pretty much everything I have to say, but I hope those breakout sessions were useful. I'm sorry they were a little bit shorter, perhaps, than you may have liked. But I hope the questions that you started to discuss will be a useful framing for you going forward. So just to wrap up, remember the most important things are you as the presenter, the script or what you're going to say, and then lastly and least importantly, the slides. Now, I know somebody had a quick question, what program do I use? I just use regular old PowerPoint for this. And Joanna asked me to mention about the setup that I recommend for giving a presentation. If you have a second screen, it is incredibly helpful, but again, don't be drawn into that temptation to start reading from your notes on a second screen. Do your best to learn and use the slides as your cue for what to say next. Don't read your script. Use the slides as like, okay, this is the next thing I've got to talk about. You know your topic, and the slides will prompt you. So yeah, I currently, just to describe that quickly, I have two screens, one where I've got the Zoom on the first screen, and then the second screen that I'm sharing. I would strongly recommend something like that to have at least one or two faces to see. Otherwise, it can be a bit disconcerting, just presenting to nothing. As I did have an experience like that recently, where I joined a meeting that I thought was 4 or 5 people, and it turned out to be one of these very large UN conference rooms with 50 or 60 people, and I only had my laptop, so I couldn't see anybody, and I had to give a presentation. It can be quite disconcerting when you can't see anyone and you can't react to your audience. So do try to have the other people on Zoom up there. So I realize we're coming up on time, so I want to leave the last 10 minutes for any questions about anything I've talked about today. I hope it was useful, this overview, and we will be doing we'll have the opportunity for one-on-ones next week, and I'll be really much looking forward to seeing all your pitches and to working through some of the ideas here together. So with that, that will be organized with Joanna, or Joanna will be coordinating with myself, but there'll be a session where you can sign up, and we will have some time for one-on-one feedback. I don't have anything else to add at this point, but other than thank you very much for having me, and over to any questions on any of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And compliments from colleagues who are passing them in the chat. Very good intro to pitching. And Elizabeth was saying she particularly likes how you're just getting your core points in over and over again. So I think we all know the introduction is key, the presenter is important, the slides are listed. Thank you. A question from Ruth. Ruth, do you want to pass it on yourself? Shall I take it for you? I think you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering if you had any views on how many, like whether to have one or more presenters, and also how to choose in a team, like who should pitch.
Sure. I would, in 3 minutes, I'd strongly recommend just having one presenter. If you're tempted to have more than one, it will break up the flow. However smoothly you try to do it, there's always a bit of friction in the handover. There's also a little bit of getting warmed up that has to happen in a presentation. And if you switch over in the middle, I think it breaks it up too much. So in this length of pitch, I would generally strongly recommend to just stick to one presenter. Your second question was, sorry, what was your second question?
Oh, just like within a team, how to choose.
Oh, okay.
If you had any thoughts about that.
Sure. I don't have a process to recommend that, but normally there's either somebody who would like to volunteer or be voluntold, depending on the team. So I suppose it's whoever feels most comfortable. Generally, you don't want to obviously get people to do something they're not comfortable with. I'm not sure what other tips I can give in selecting a presenter. Yeah, I don't have any other particular tips. I just whoever feels the most comfortable, I think, is ideal.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to give to Hakeem in a second, but before that, a quick question from Max from our UN Digital ID team. Any recommendations on the number of questions and the number of slides?
Sure. In 3 minutes, again, I would recommend you sticking to roughly half a dozen. So around 6. You know, more than 10, you start to be flicking through them too quickly. You want to be thinking about, again, those key points you want your audience to remember and stick them on the slides, right? So, you know, you don't want to overload them with too much information, but just a couple of core central slides, possibly 3, with the 3 key ideas that you want people to remember, your intro and your recap, where you maybe list the 3 core points again. You can still see my screen, you know, again, listing the 3 core points that you want people to remember. Again, so yeah, maybe half a dozen.
Thank you, Jamie. Hakeem, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for the great presentation. Just wanted to ask, after watching the Dragon's Den as well, and having a lot of funny memories watching that in the past, people often get grilled on numbers and figures. And I wanted to ask you, how much emphasis do you think we should put on, especially in a pitch, how much money we would like, or, you know, in terms of figures? And is it something we should keep to the end or be clear about from the start? Yeah, numbers, basically.
Sure. To be honest with you, I'm always a bit hesitant to include a concrete ask in the pitch. Some people have strong opinions on this. So sometimes some UN agencies say, no, we want everyone to have an ask, and others say it's fine, it's up to you. So my general feeling is that if you want money, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for money. So I would generally not put a concrete, hey, we need 3 million to get my idea off the ground, because you may find you lose some people early on in the process at that point. Numbers overall, you want to keep to a minimum, right? Remember, people will forget almost everything about your presentation within 5 minutes. If there's a couple of things that you think, this is super important, you know, I really want everyone to remember the fact that, I don't know, there are 500 million people who need this service, or something like that, then by all means include a number that supports your argument, but don't overload people with numbers, right? It's very tempting, and again, another common mistake, which I actually haven't got on here, is people will say, well, you know, there's 5 million people who have this, and we're going to help 20% of them, and we've already got 3,000 that we're onboarding, and, you know, it takes 5 days to do so, and you're sitting there going, well, 5 what, 3,000, 8? I can't remember any of this. So numbers, my tip would be keep them to a minimum, and you know, include any important numbers. There are different opinions about asks, whether you should have a concrete ask or not. My opinion is I would not have a concrete number ask, but there are other people who disagree and say it's better to include that. So it's up to you.
Thank you very much.
Answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. And if I can come in here very briefly, I wouldn't possibly disagree with Jamie on the number ask, but what we're going to ask you to do is actually think very carefully about what is the, not so much the monetary number that you need, but what are the kind of capabilities that you will need to advance your idea? What are kind of the blockers that you have, and how could you think about overcoming them? So that could be, I need an AI programmer, or I need to speak to this person. So we're going to be reaching out to you, and especially the teams going to the Dragon's Den and asking you to really think about that and also tell us in advance. So that is going to be an ask from our side to you to make yours clear. It doesn't necessarily need to feature in the Dragon's Den, but you might want to reflect on that. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So Jamie, that means you are clear. Well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. It was really, really great to be here. And I do look forward to speaking to you all more one-on-one small group sessions, hopefully next week. So really looking forward to that. And thank you all for,
So are we. Thank you, Jamie.